The wind howled across the dry hills, tugging at the yellowed grass like a mother pulling a child from danger. A storm was brewing in the west, thunder rolling low and mean over the canyon's edge. But Bo Maddox had no time for storms. Not with half his dam fence knocked flat by last night's lightning strike, or sabotage, though he hadn't the proof. His leg, stiff and aching with every step, dragged behind him like an insult from God himself. He bent over the splintered wood, sweat already collecting under the brim of his weather-worn hat. Nails scattered in the dust. His hammer, dulled from years of use, thudded uselessly against the stubborn post. Bo cursed under his breath and dropped it. Pain shot up from the stump where his knee used to be. He let it wash through him, a bitter tide he no longer tried to stop. A voice cut through the silence, low and warm. "Need a hand, rancher?" He turned, squinting against the harsh light. She sat atop a dappled mare, posture straight as an arrow, eyes shaded by the rim of a blue hat that had seen better years. The woman didn't flinch when he stared too long. She looked like she belonged on that horse. Lean muscle, steady hands, no nonsense. "Fence is mine," he said finally. "Don't need charity." She dismounted in one clean movement, boots crunching the dirt. "Didn't offer charity. I offered help." Difference. He didn't argue, mostly because she'd already taken a pair of gloves from her saddlebag and knelt beside the broken post. Her hair, dark and coiled in a loose bun, caught the sunlight just enough to show a few gray threads at the temples. Not old, just seasoned. Like a rifle that never misfires. Bo watched, lips pressed to a hard line, as she set a post straight with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. It unsettled him, this stranger working his land, knowing her way around the tools without asking where things were. He finally found his voice. "You always trespass this polite?" She smiled without looking up. "You're the one left his gate wide open. Besides, I'm Nora Whitlock. Bought the field 2 miles east after my husband passed." "Maddox," he grunted. "Bo Maddox." "I know," she said simply. "Whole town's got your name in their mouths. Some say you're stubborn. Some say you're cursed. I figured I'd find out myself." Bo didn't answer. Instead, he hammered a nail with sharp, deliberate strikes. The old rumors still clung to him like prairie dust. He'd lost his leg and his men in a shootout near the rail lines, some government dispute gone sideways. Since then, solitude had been his only company, and his land his only reason to keep breathing. Nora worked in silence beside him, glancing occasionally toward the ridge. She didn't talk more than needed, and he found that suited him just fine. By late afternoon, they'd raised 5 posts together. She rolled her shoulders back with a quiet grunt. "You're not half bad at this," she said, brushing dust from her hands. "For a one-legged hermit." Bo allowed the ghost of a smirk. "You've got a sharp tongue for a widow." She arched a brow. "You expect us to stay soft-spoken and sad forever?" "No. I expect you to be smarter than helping a cripple fix a fence in storm weather." Lightning forked in the far distance, barely visible. Nora looked toward it thoughtfully. "My husband died in a storm like that. Horse spooked, they said. Kicked him clean into a ravine." "That's what they said?" Bo asked, catching the edge in her voice. She turned to him, jaw tight. "I didn't say I believed it." There was a silence between them, one that settled into the dry wind and stayed there. The kind of silence that felt like shared weight. Eventually she picked up her reins. "Well, the post'll hold a few days at least. You've still got work to do." "I'll manage," he said, though he didn't sound certain. She mounted up with the ease of someone raised in a saddle. "I'll come back next week. That corner line's gonna sag." "I didn't ask you to," he called. She paused, turned in the saddle, eyes narrowing slightly. "I know." Then she rode off, and Bo stood staring at the dust trail her horse kicked up. He felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest, a kind of restlessness that hadn't troubled him since the war. A seed, small and unwelcome. Over the next few days he kept to himself, fixing what they'd left undone. But he found himself looking toward the ridge more than once, listening for hoofbeats. He told himself it was caution. He knew better. The following week, true to her word, she returned. She brought with her a tin of coffee, an extra coil of wire, and no explanation. They worked in silence again, though the silences now felt different. Less like strangers, more like something waiting to be named. Nora was different from the town women who stared too long or pitted too loudly. She moved with purpose. She laughed at things he thought he'd forgotten were funny. Once, when a lizard scurried across his boot and he nearly fell, she said, "Guess you're lucky you didn't land on the side that works," and he'd laughed before he realized. On the third day, while resetting a post in the back pasture, they found hoof prints near the creek bed, Too fresh to be random, too precise to be cowhands. Nora crouched, running her fingers through the trampled grass. "You get visitors out here often?" she asked. "No," he said, eyes narrowing. "And not on that trail." He knelt beside her. The tracks were light, someone riding alone, carefully. Not a drunk, not a cowboy passing through. "Could be someone checking boundaries," she said, but there was something cautious in her voice. Bo stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Or someone testing them." They said nothing more about it, but both were more alert that evening. Nora stayed later than usual, drinking from a dented tin cup as the wind kicked up again. "Storm's turning back," she said quietly. "Smells like rain." Bo sniffed the air. "Or blood." She gave him a look, not amused but not dismissive either. "You always talk like that?" He shrugged. "Only when it's true." She stood, brushing her coat off. "You need a proper fence crew." "I don't have one." "You need people." "I don't trust people." "You trusted me." He looked at her, then really looked. "I didn't have much say in it." "You always have a say." She mounted her horse again. "Next time maybe I bring a rifle instead of wire. Just in case our quiet rider comes back." He nodded, jaw tight. "Appreciated." Nora lingered a moment longer, then gave her reins a light tug and rode off. Her silhouette disappeared behind the mesquite trees, and once again, Bo stood alone with the weight of too many unspoken thoughts. That night he dreamt of fire, wood snapping, bullets flying, someone screaming his name. When he woke, the room was dark, but his chest still burned with that old guilt. He reached for his flask, then thought better of it. Instead, he stepped out into the moonlight. The land stretched quiet beneath the stars, fence lines casting thin shadows over the earth. He walked to the post Nora had braced herself against earlier that day. He ran his hand across the grain. He thought of her hands, her eyes, her sharp tongue. And the way she hadn't flinched when he spoke of blood. Something was coming. He could feel it, like a bad wind curling around his bones. Bo Maddox wasn't a man who believed in signs. But that post, straight, clean, strong, felt like one. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if he was ready. The morning sun crept over the horizon like a slow-burning match, igniting the sky in dusty golds and bruised purples. Bo Maddox sat on his porch, one boot resting on the railing, the other leg, his half leg, stretched awkwardly to the side. He sipped his coffee, but his eyes weren't on the sunrise. They were fixed on the narrow dirt trail that wound east, where the hills flattened into the Whitlock land. It had been 3 weeks since Nora started showing up regularly. At first it was every few days. Then it became a habit neither of them spoke about. She'd ride in with wire or tools or something he supposedly needed, though he suspected sometimes she brought things just to have an excuse. He never called her out on it. He wasn't sure he wanted her to stop. He liked her silence. Her steadiness. The way she didn't treat him like a broken thing. And though he hadn't said it out loud, he liked the way her presence made the ranch feel less haunted. That morning, though, she was late. He heard the horse before he saw it, hooves tapping a steady beat against hard-packed earth. Nora came into view, dust on her coat, eyes shadowed under her hat. But there was something different in her posture. Tense, like a wire pulled tight. Bo stood as she approached, setting the coffee down on the rail. "Storm keep you?" he asked, trying for casual. "No storm," she said, swinging off the saddle. "Just ran into Vern Cale in town." Bo's face hardened. "That bastard still sniffing around?" "He's not just sniffing," she said, her voice low. "He asks questions. About me. About you. About the fence." Bo's jaw clenched. Vern Cale had once been a deputy under a corrupt sheriff, and when the railroad came through, he'd taken to playing both sides. Land disputes, forced buyouts, backroom deals. Now he styled himself a rancher, but everyone knew he was still dirty. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that end in bullets," Nora said. She looked toward the ridge. "I think he's trying to push you off your land. Quietly. Slowly. Fence by fence." Bo nodded once. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it from her made it real. They worked through the morning in silence. The sun climbed higher, and the air thickened with heat. Sweat soaked Bo's collar. His leg ached with every step, but he forced himself to keep pace. Nora didn't complain, though he noticed her eyes darting more often to the tree line. By noon they reached the far pasture, where the earth curved down toward the creek. That's when they saw it, 2 posts broken clean in half, wire cut, not torn. Too neat to be an animal. Nora crouched down, fingers tracing the cut. "They brought bolt cutters." "Professional," Bo muttered. "Or bold." She stood slowly, brushing her hands on her pants. "We can't keep fixing fences forever." We need to show them we're not just standing here waiting to be pushed. I'm not looking for a fight, Bo said. Maybe not, Nora replied, but one's looking for you. The words sat between them like a coiled snake. Later that day, while tightening a section of wire, Bo noticed something shimmering in the dirt near the post. He knelt and picked it up. A casing, fired, spent. His brow furrowed. He hadn't fired a round in weeks. He held it up. You carrying anything besides that pistol? Nora shook her head. Just the one. This isn't yours, he said, voice tight. Someone's been out here practicing. Or leaving warnings. That night he oiled his old rifle. He hadn't touched it in over a year, but his fingers remembered. Nora stayed late again. They shared a quiet supper, beans, salted pork, and bread that was too dry but good enough. Afterward they sat on the porch. The stars came out slow as if testing the night. You think Vern was behind your husband's accident? Bo asked without looking at her. I know he was, she said softly. But knowing and proving are two different things. Bo studied her profile in the moonlight. She looked calm, but her knuckles were white around the coffee tin. He was trying to buy Elias out, she continued. Offered him twice what the land was worth. Elias refused. Said the land was ours, meant to be passed on. The week after, he was dead. Bo's voice was low. And nobody saw anything? Oh, plenty saw, Nora said with a bitter smile. Just none who'd speak up. Fear makes good men quiet. Bo thought of the townsfolk always looking away. He thought of the way they whispered his name, not from respect but unease. You ever think of selling? She asked suddenly. He snorted. And let Vern win? That's what I thought. The next morning they returned to the pasture. A new surprise awaited them. A dead jackrabbit nailed to the gatepost, its blood still wet. Bo stared at it for a long moment before pulling it down. They're making this personal. It already was, Nora said. They know we're working together. They're trying to shake us apart. I don't shake easy, Bo said. She looked at him, then eyes meeting his. Good. Neither do I. They kept working, replacing wire and reinforcing posts, but there was tension in every movement now. The quiet had weight. Every creak of a branch or rustle in the brush made them reach instinctively for weapons they hadn't had to use in years. Around midday they heard it, a sharp rustle, too heavy to be wind. Then a low growl. From the brush burst a wild dog, lean and mangy, foam at its mouth. Nora reached first, drawing her revolver and firing once. The bullet struck dirt. The dog kept coming. Bo swung his hammer, catching it in the ribs. It yelped and staggered but didn't fall. Nora fired again, and this time the shot hit home. The dog collapsed, twitching, then lay still. Nora was breathing hard, hands trembling slightly. Bo laid a hand on her shoulder. You all right? She nodded, swallowing. That wasn't no stray. That thing was starved, trained maybe. Scent. Bo agreed but said nothing. He didn't want to feed her fear. That night, Bo cleaned the rifle again. He sat alone in the barn, lantern light flickering. He hadn't felt this particular weight in years, the kind that settled in your spine when you knew something was coming. Not maybe. Definitely. He thought of Nora. Of her fire. Her strength. And also of her pain. She reminded him too much of himself. When she returned the next day, she brought more than wire. A map, she said, unrolling it on his table. I found it in Elias's old chest. It shows land lines, real ones, not what's recorded at the land office. Elias had a claim. Bigger than what anyone thought. If this gets out. Vern loses everything, Bo finished. She nodded. Which means he won't stop. Bo leaned on the table, eyes scanning the faded ink. You think Elias died for this? I'd bet my life on it, she said. Then with a bitter laugh, I already did. He looked at her then, not as someone helping him, not as someone broken, but as someone dangerous in the right way. Someone ready. You sure you want to keep coming out here? He asked. This isn't going to get any easier. I didn't come for easy, she replied. They stared at each other for a beat too long, then went back to work. The sun dipped lower. Birds circled lazily above. That night, Bo sat on the porch again. He couldn't sleep. The fence line stretched long into the dusk, a thin, defiant line between him and the world that kept trying to take things from him. A sound behind him, a soft knock on the porch post. He turned. Nora stood there, holding something in her hands. A bottle. I figured we earned a drink, she said. He nodded. She handed it over, then sat beside him. They passed the bottle in silence, watching the last of the light fade. Bo, she said after a long time, I don't think either of us is going to walk away clean from this. No, he said. But we'll walk through it. Together if you stay. She looked at him. I'll stay. And just like that, something shifted. Not spoken but solid. Far off, in the trees, something moved. But they didn't look away from each other. Tomorrow would come. And with it, more fire. But tonight they sat still, shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the dark. The first bullet cracked through the morning air like a whip, slicing the calm into ribbons. Bo dropped to a crouch beside the feed trough just as another round pinged off the barn wall behind him. Dust flew up around his boots. He didn't need to guess who was shooting. Vern Cale had stopped hiding in shadows. He was done with broken fences and threats left in the dark. This was open war now. From the direction of the ridge, Nora's voice rang out sharp and defiant. Two men, one behind the dead tree, the other higher up on the bluff. Bo cursed under his breath. He'd known this was coming, had smelled it in the air like the ozone before a storm, but it still hit like a fist to the chest. He belly crawled toward the barn, each movement jarring his bad leg. Grit scraped under his palms, the smell of blood and gunpowder already in the air. Inside the barn, he grabbed the rifle from the wall and checked the chamber. Loaded. He moved to the side window and caught a glimpse of one of the shooters, a wiry man in a brown hat leaning out from behind a rock. Bo didn't hesitate. One clean shot dropped the man, and the silence that followed made the whole world still. Then another shot rang out, and a scream followed, Nora's voice. He was moving before he even registered the motion, kicking open the back door of the barn and sprinting toward the ridge, heart hammering, mind blank with panic. He found her behind the water trough, holding her side, blood slick between her fingers. I'm fine, she gasped, teeth clenched. Just grazed. Grazed my ass, Bo growled, kneeling beside her. You're hit. It didn't go deep, she insisted, waving him off. Her revolver was still in her hand, knuckles white around the grip. Bo looked up toward the tree line, jaw tight. No more gunfire. No more movement. You sure there were only two? She nodded, then winced. I'm sure. He pulled his bandana from his pocket and pressed it to her wound. She didn't flinch. Just locked eyes with him, steady and fierce. This is just the start, she said. He knew she was right. They retreated to the house. Bo barred the doors and checked the windows while Nora cleaned her wound at the kitchen sink. He hated seeing her like that, wounded, breath hitching with every motion, but he didn't say a word. She wouldn't want pity. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey and handed it to her. She drank it in one gulp. Vern's making his move, Bo said. He's not playing around anymore. He knows about the map, Nora replied. I left a copy in the bank vault, but he must have found something, maybe one of Elias's old letters. Bo sat down, the chair creaking beneath him. The air felt thick, like the pressure before a lightning strike. I think it's time, he said quietly. Time for what? To bring this into town. Nora frowned. The sheriff? Not the law. The people. We show them the map, the deeds, everything. If we bring it into the light, Vern loses his hold. He won't let that happen without a fight, she said. Bo looked out the window, eyes narrowing. Then we fight. The next day, Nora stayed behind to rest while Bo rode into town. Every hoofbeat echoed through his bones. He hadn't been to Coldwater in weeks, not since his legs started giving him more grief than he could hide. The town hadn't changed, same leaning storefronts, same lazy dogs asleep on the boardwalk, but the way people looked at him had. Eyes followed him as he dismounted. Some nodded. Others looked away. He stepped into the post office first, then the bank. Each stop was a quiet storm. Papers handed over, names whispered, secrets traded. By midday the town was humming. Outside the saloon he found Sheriff Lane smoking on the porch. The man looked tired, more paper pusher than lawman, but he straightened when Bo approached. Heard you had trouble on the ranch, the sheriff said. Bo nodded. I've got proof now. About Cale. About the land. I'm asking you to stand behind it. The sheriff exhaled smoke and scratched his beard. You know what you're stirring, right? I know, Bo said. But I'm done letting fear run things. The sheriff nodded slowly. Then I'll back you. But you better be ready. Cale's not gonna fold. As Bo turned to leave, a voice called out from across the street. Didn't expect to see you in town, Maddox. Vern stood in front of the general store, flanked by 2 of his men. Smug. Dangerous. Bo faced him squarely. I'm done playing polite. Vern's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then I guess we stop pretending, don't we? Bo didn't answer. Just walked away. That night, he returned to the ranch to find Nora on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, a lantern flickering beside her. How bad? She asked. Not as bad as I expected, he replied, settling beside her. Some of them remember Elias. They're ready to listen. She didn't smile, but he saw something soften in her. We're not done, she said. No, Bo agreed. But we're not alone anymore. The next week was tense. Word spread through the valley. Old ranchers came out of hiding. Papers were shared. Deeds examined. Vern's name, once whispered with caution, now rang louder. Accusations traded over fence lines and in saloons. But with every step forward, the danger grew. One night, Bo found a noose hanging from his gate. Another, they woke to smoke. Someone had set fire to the hay barn. They put it out in time, but the message was clear. Vern wasn't going to fade quietly. Still, Bo and Nora didn't back down. They fortified the ranch, took turns keeping watch. And in the quieter moments, something began to shift between them, not just alliance or trust, but something unspoken and deep. He caught her humming once while sweeping the porch, and it stirred something in him he thought long dead. She found him asleep in the barn one afternoon, rifle on his lap, and brushed a strand of hair from his eyes before walking away. They didn't speak of it, but it grew. And then the letter arrived. Nora found it nailed to the chicken coop door, envelope smeared with blood. Inside, a single sheet of paper written in careful block letters. You have one chance to walk away. Show your face in town again and she dies. V. ***. Bo read it twice, then handed it to her. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. It's meant to scare us. Make us retreat. He doesn't bluff, Bo said. Neither do we. But that night, Nora disappeared. Bo woke to an empty house, her blanket folded neatly on the chair. No sign of struggle. Just a quiet absence that screamed louder than any gunshot. Panic gripped him. He searched the ranch, the barn, the trails leading east and south. Nothing. Just hoof prints leading toward Coldwater. She'd gone alone. By morning, the truth hit him like a runaway horse. She hadn't run away in fear. She'd gone to finish it herself, to stop Vern no matter the cost. Bo stood in the doorway of his house, staring at the horizon. His rifle leaned against the wall. His bad leg throbbed, every step a reminder of what he'd lost. But now he had something to fight for. Not land. Not revenge. He reached for the rifle. Loaded it with steady hands. Then he strapped on his old sidearm, the leather creaking like a long-buried memory. The sun was rising. The wind had shifted. It was time. As he mounted his horse and turned toward town, he didn't look back. Not because there was nothing left behind, but because everything that mattered was waiting ahead. The wind ripped through the empty street of Coldwater as Bo rode in at full gallop, dust curling behind his horse like a storm cloud. Every window shuttered, every door latched tight. It was a town holding its breath. He knew why. They'd heard what Vern Cale was planning, and they didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. Bo didn't blame them. Hell, if he were just a rancher with a few acres and a family to think of, he'd have locked his door too. But Nora was in this town somewhere, and Bo Maddox hadn't fought this hard, hadn't bled and clawed his way back to life, just to lose her now. He tied off his horse outside the sheriff's office. No sign of Lane. No lantern in the window. He knocked once, waited. Nothing. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, rifle at the ready. Empty. The papers on the sheriff's desk were scattered, one drawer hanging open, keys still in the lock. Bo's gut tightened. This wasn't just fear, this was evacuation. Or surrender. He stepped back out and scanned the rooftops. Shadows shifted near the livery. He moved slowly down the boardwalk, boots thudding like war drums, eyes tracking movement. Then a figure stepped out from the alley, Addie Miller, the baker's widow. Gray hair tucked beneath a scarf, apron streaked with flour. She looked up at him with eyes full of quiet fear. She's in the church, Bo. He didn't ask how she knew. Didn't waste breath on thanks. Just tipped his hat and turned. The church sat at the far end of town, its bell tower rising against the blue sky like a fist. It hadn't rung in years, not since Pastor Wills left and no one bothered to replace him. But today it held something sacred, Nora. And maybe the last chance either of them had. He crossed the threshold with his rifle lowered but eyes sharp. The sanctuary was dim, stained glass painting blood-colored light across the pews. At the far end, Nora stood at the altar, arms bound, mouth gagged. Beside her, Vern Cale leaned against the pulpit like a man delivering Sunday scripture. 3 men flanked him, rifles pointed casually in her direction. Bo didn't hesitate. Let her go, Vern. The outlaw's grin spread like oil on water. Maddox, took you long enough. Bo took one slow step forward. You got your message across. I'm here. She's not part of this. Vern chuckled low and hollow. She's the only part of this that matters. You don't get it yet, do you? This ain't about land. Ain't about old letters or deeds or even gold. This is about legacy. Control. You and her together? That threatens everything I've built. What you built was stolen, Bo said, voice low and firm. Elias knew it. You killed him because he wouldn't let you take the last piece. He got in my way, Vern said with a shrug. Just like she's getting in mine. Bo's finger rested lightly on the trigger. He could hit 2 before the others returned fire. Maybe. But Nora was too close. One wrong move. Then Nora did something no one expected. She stomped her heel hard on Vern's boot. He cursed, flinched back. In that instant Bo fired. The first shot hit the man nearest Vern, sending him sprawling backward over a pew. Chaos erupted. Vern lunged toward Nora, but she'd already twisted sideways, knocking his arm off balance. Bo fired again, hitting the second man in the shoulder. The third scrambled for cover, but Bo was faster. In seconds the sanctuary was still. Smoke coiled through the air like incense. Vern lay on the floor, groaning, blood spreading beneath his side. Nora pulled the gag from her mouth, gasping. Bo ran to her, slashing the rope from her wrists with his pocket knife. She collapsed against him for a second, just a second, but long enough for him to feel the tremble in her limbs. Long enough for him to hold her tight. I told you not to come alone, he whispered. She pulled back, her face fierce despite the bruises. I didn't. I knew you'd follow. Sirens would have felt out of place here. Instead, what they got was the quiet creak of the church door opening again. Sheriff Lane stepped inside, revolver drawn, a few townsfolk behind him. The tension in his shoulders eased when he saw Bo standing, Nora beside him. Lane looked down at Vern, who was barely conscious now. You gonna live? He asked. Vern coughed and spat blood. Go to hell. Lane holstered his gun. Guess he'll have to answer to someone. The sheriff nodded toward 2 men who stepped forward and began hauling Vern out the door. Nora sagged against Bo, suddenly looking 10 years older. It's done, she murmured. He shook his head. Not yet. They stepped out of the church into the town square, where a small crowd had gathered. Dust hung in the air, thick and still. For a moment no one spoke. Then Addie Miller stepped forward and said, I always believed you, Nora. Others began to murmur. A young man raised his hat. A rancher slapped his thigh. One by one they gathered around, no longer silent. Bo felt it then, the tide turning. The fear that had gripped the valley for years had broken, washed away not by law or bullets, but by truth, by grit, by 2 people who refused to be bent. They stayed in town that night. Sheriff Lane offered them the old boarding house room, long abandoned, and Bo carried Nora up the stairs himself. She winced at every bump but didn't complain. Inside, she sat on the edge of the bed while Bo poured water into the basin. I thought I'd lost you, he said quietly. She looked up. I knew you hadn't. Bo shook his head. No. I mean before today. Before any of this. I'd stopped feeling anything worth fighting for. Losing my leg, the ranch falling apart. I wasn't living anymore. I was waiting to die. Nora stood slowly, moving toward him. And now. He met her eyes. Now I want more. She reached up, touched the scar on his cheek. So do I. There were no promises. No declarations. Just 2 people standing in the ashes of something terrible, holding each other like the world had finally gone quiet. Outside, the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Coldwater would wake soon. And the world would move on. But for now, in this quiet room above the broken streets, there was peace. For the first time in years, Bo Maddox closed his eyes without fear. He had survived hell. And she had brought him back. But he knew deep down that the fight wasn't entirely over. Something always lingers in the dust of a place like Coldwater. Secrets buried deep and promises made in blood. And in the morning, when the sun rose clean over the ridges, there would be one more letter waiting. One more truth neither of them expected. Because the story didn't end with Vern Cale. Not yet. The morning light spilled through the cracks in the boarding house shutters, soft and golden, warming the old pine floor. Bo sat in silence at the edge of the bed, boots in hand, his leg braced straight and stiff. The quiet between him and Nora wasn't heavy, it was shared, like a breath held together. She watched him from the chair by the window, hair still damp from washing, a small crease between her brows. He could feel it. Something unsettled. Not fear exactly, but the weight of something unfinished. A soft knock at the door broke it. Sheriff Lane stood on the other side, hat in hand. Mornin', he said quietly. I wouldn't have bothered, but this came to the office early. Addressed to both of you. He handed Bo a single envelope, plain and unmarked except for their names written in a sharp, angular hand. Bo turned it over, tore it open. Inside was a single folded note and an old photograph, grainy, sun-faded. Bo held it to the light. A young man, lean and dark-haired, stood in front of a cabin. Elias. And standing beside him was another man, older, broader-shouldered, with cold eyes and a knowing smirk. Not Vern. Nora leaned in, her breath hitching. That's his brother. Malcolm Cale. Lane looked between them. Didn't know Vern had a brother. He doesn't talk about him, Bo said, jaw tight. Because Malcolm ran before the law could hang him. Disappeared 20 years ago, Nora added. But if he's sending letters now. Then Vern wasn't the end of it, Bo finished. This goes deeper. Lane swore under his breath. You're not gonna like this next part. Malcolm didn't just vanish. He's been in Wyoming. Running under a different name. Now there's talk of him coming back, buying up land just north of the valley. Nora stood, tension radiating through her. Why now? Lane shrugged. Maybe he thinks with Vern out of the way, there's space for him to finish what was started. Bo looked back at the photo. The smirk on Malcolm's face didn't just say confidence. It said ownership. Entitlement. Lane left soon after, promising to wire the marshals. But Bo knew better. The law might help, but men like Malcolm Cale didn't wait for courtrooms. They came with fire and men on payrolls who'd sell out their kin for a shot of whiskey and a purse of silver. That afternoon, Bo and Nora rode back to the ranch. It wasn't just a homestead anymore, it was the last line. Every fence post, every timber meant something more now. This was where Elias had lived, where he'd stood his ground. Where Bo had nearly died and where Nora had rebuilt him. She rode ahead, her silhouette strong against the ridge. She'd healed from the gunshot, but the fire in her hadn't dulled. If anything, it burned brighter now. And Bo, he followed her without hesitation, rifle strapped across his saddle, eyes scanning the horizon. They spent the day reinforcing. Boarding windows, checking ammunition, repositioning the stock to safer ground. By nightfall, the ranch was a fortress. Not perfect, but strong enough. Bo sat on the porch with a lantern between them. Nora sipped coffee, her eyes distant. I thought when Vern fell, it'd feel like a chapter closing, she said quietly. Bo nodded. But it just tore the cover off. She looked at him. You think we can survive another storm? He didn't answer immediately. Just reached for her hand. We already are. They slept in shifts watching the hills. But dawn came with no attack. Nor did the next. Or the one after that. It made them restless. Then, on the fifth night, the dog started barking. Bo was up before the echo died. He stepped outside, shotgun in hand, Nora behind him. A single horse approached from the trail, rider dressed in black, slow and deliberate. When the man reached the gate, he stopped. Bo leveled the gun. State your business. The man raised his hands. I'm just the messenger. Nora stepped forward. Who sent you? The man smiled. Malcolm Cale. He says he's got an offer. One meeting. No ambush, no guns, just talk. Bo's lip curled. And if we don't show? Then he comes anyway. With a different tone. The rider tossed a folded paper at Bo's feet and turned. As his horse faded into the dark, Bo bent down, opened the note. It read, *High noon. Tomorrow. The old cedar grove. And beneath it, come alone or she dies. Bo's knuckles went white. I'm going, he said. Nora stepped in front of him. Not without me. His voice was low. You know what he's capable of. So do you? But if we keep fighting their wars by their rules, we lose. Every time. He looked at her, eyes tight. I already lost you once. Her voice broke, but her gaze held firm. Then don't make the same mistake twice. The next day, the sun rose sharp and merciless. They rode together, side by side, through dry fields and dying brush. The cedar grove lay 2 miles east, an old clearing where Elias had once carved their family mark into a tree. They reached it at noon. Malcolm Cale was already there. That was just beginning. He stood with the relaxed air of a man who believed the world owed him. Black duster, white gloves, and a thin cane he didn't need. 2 of his men flanked him, rifles slung casually. But their eyes tracked every move Bo and Nora made. You look like your brother, Bo said. Malcolm smiled. And yet, I turned out far more effective. Nora stepped forward. You have no claim here. Malcolm tilted his head. Don't I? Elias promised me partnership once. Before he grew a conscience. Everything he built was half mine. Vern tried to finish the job. He failed. Now I will. You don't build a legacy by stealing graves, Bo growled. Legacy? Malcolm laughed. You think this is about land? This is about control. Fear. History remembers the ones who rewrite the maps. He took a step forward, eyes hard now. I'm offering you a chance. Walk away. I'll spare the town. I'll leave her standing. But this land becomes mine. Bo stepped between him and Nora. You think we bled for nothing? No, Malcolm said. I think you bled for a ghost. Then he snapped his fingers. Gunfire erupted. Bo tackled Nora to the dirt as bullets tore through bark and dust. He rolled, fired, dropped one of the men clean through the eye. The second went for cover, but Nora was faster. Her shot caught him in the leg, then another in the chest. Malcolm tried to run. Bo caught him at the edge of the clearing, tackled him hard. The cane clattered away. They struggled, Malcolm landing blows like a cornered wolf, but Bo didn't let up. You think legacy is stolen? He growled. It's earned. He slammed Malcolm to the dirt, panting, blood running from his lip. Nora limped over, revolver shaking in her hand. End this. But Bo didn't shoot. He pulled the man to his feet and spat. You get your trial. You rot where the world can watch. Malcolm smiled through the blood. You're soft. No, Bo said. I'm finally free. By the time they returned to town with Malcolm in cuffs, the people were waiting. Word traveled fast in Coldwater. Lane met them at the jailhouse steps. Looks like justice is finally catching up. Bo didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just turned to Nora. She looked at him, tears forming. It's over. No, he said gently. Now it begins. They rebuilt the ranch that summer. Together. Post by post, acre by acre, until the land felt whole again. When the first snow fell, Bo took Nora's hand beneath the old cedar, the one with Elias's mark, and carved a new one beside it. A B and an N. Side by side. Weathered, permanent. He kissed her then, not out of passion or desperation, but something quieter. A promise. And this time it wasn't survival. It was life. Their story, carved in blood and dust and wild western sky, had found its final page. But the legacy they built?